Good evening, friends. Come on in. Keep your voices down tonight. We all know what December 7th sounds like. It sounds like screaming sirens. It sounds like the roar of zero engines diving out of the clouds. It sounds like steel tearing apart and the terrible hiss of fire on water. That sound is burned into our national DNA. We learn it in school before we can even tie our shoes. But I'm willing to bet you a shiny silver dollar that you don't know what December 6th sounded like. You see, history isn't just about explosions. It's about the silence right before the fuse is lit. And tonight, on this particular Saturday, I want to take you back to the very edge of the cliff. I want you to look at the calendar on the wall. It says December 6, 1941. It's a Saturday. In Washington, D.C., politicians are arguing about diplomacy. In Tokyo, admirals are holding their breath. But in Hawaii? In Hawaii, the trade winds are blowing, the air smells like roasted pig and plumeria flowers, and the only thing people are worried about is whether they can get a ticket to the big show tonight. So, pull up a chair. Let's sit in the dark for a while and talk about the last quiet night the world ever saw. Imagine the scene, Oahu, 1941. It wasn't the concrete jungle of high-rise hotels you see today. It was wilder, greener. The fleet was in. The Pacific Fleet, the giant iron fist of America, had returned to Pearl Harbor for the weekend. We called it Battleship Row. Just close your eyes and picture them. The USS Arizona, the USS Oklahoma, the USS West Virginia, the USS California. These weren't just ships. They were floating cities, massive gray mountains of steel resting side by side in the warm water. They looked invincible. And because they looked invincible, we felt safe. That Saturday afternoon was lazy. The sun was hot. Sailors were on shore leave, flooding into Honolulu. Imagine Hotel Street. It was a river of white uniforms, thousands of young men, barely old enough to shave, laughing, shouting, looking for a cold drink and maybe a pretty girl to talk to. They were spending their paychecks on tattoos, postcards, and taxi rides. The mood wasn't tense. There were no sandbags piled up on the street corners. There were no blackouts. The lights of the Aloha Tower were shining bright, guiding ships in. Why would we be worried? We were America. We were thousands of miles from the war in Europe. And Japan? Well, the newspapers said they were making noise, but surely they wouldn't dare touch the sleeping giant. That arrogance, that beautiful, tragic arrogance. It was as thick as the humidity in the air. Now, I want to zoom in on one specific building, the Bloch Recreation Center at the Pearl Harbor Naval Base. If you were there at 9 p.m. tonight on December 6th, you wouldn't hear talk of war. You would hear swing. It was the finals of the Battle of the Bands. This was a huge deal. Each ship had its own jazz band, and they were competing for the trophy. The place was packed. Imagine the smell: cigarette smoke, hair tonic, floor wax, and sweat. The crowd was roaring. And on stage, the band from the USS Arizona. I want you to think about those boys. There was a trumpet player, probably 19 or 20 years old. He's standing under the hot stage lights, sweat dripping down his collar, blowing his heart out on a Glenn Miller tune. The crowd is clapping along. They are drinking warm Coca-Cola from glass bottles. They are happy. That trumpet player? He wasn't thinking about strafing runs. He was thinking about hitting the high note. He was thinking about the letter he was going to write to his sweetheart in Iowa tomorrow morning. He didn't know that he was playing his own requiem. He didn't know that in less than 12 hours, that trumpet would be twisted scrap metal at the bottom of the harbor, and he would be gone. It haunts me. The joy in that room, it was the last burst of energy before the end of the world. Now, let's leave the warm, smoky jazz hall. Let's travel 230 miles north. The contrast is enough to give you frostbite. While Hawaii was warm and loud, the North Pacific was freezing and silent. Out there, in the pitch-black darkness, was the Kido Butai, the Japanese Mobile striking force, 6 aircraft carriers, the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, the Hiryu, the Shokaku, and the Zuikaku. They were cutting through rough 15-foot waves. The spray was ice cold. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the size of the fleet. It was the silence. Total. Radio. Silence. For days, they hadn't sent a single signal. They had even removed the fuses from their radios, so no one could make a mistake. They threw no trash overboard, not even a piece of paper, so no trail would be left behind. Thousands of sailors and pilots were on those ships, moving like ghosts. On this Saturday night, the Japanese pilots were preparing too, but they weren't dancing. They were writing their final letters. They were clipping their fingernails and cutting locks of their hair. They put these clippings into small envelopes to leave behind for their families, just in case their bodies never returned. That is the difference. One side was playing jazz. The other side was sharpening the blade. You might ask me, Pop, how? How did we not see 6 aircraft carriers? Well, we were looking, but we were looking for the wrong thing. This is the part that makes you want to pound your fist on the table. The man in charge of the Army defenses, General Short, was a smart man, but he was paranoid about the wrong enemy. He wasn't afraid of airplanes. He was afraid of spies. He thought local saboteurs might sneak onto the airfields and blow up our planes. So, on this Saturday night, he gave an order. He ordered all the fighter planes, the P-40 Warhawks, the B-17 bombers, to be parked in tight groups, wingtip to wingtip, right in the middle of the runway. He wanted them close together, so they could be easily guarded by a few men with rifles. Do you see the tragedy? By bunching them up to save them from a spy on the ground, he created the perfect juicy target for a bomber in the sky. When the Japanese planes arrived the next morning, they didn't even have to aim. One bomb could destroy 5 American planes. We lined them up for the slaughter. And the ammunition? This is the detail that keeps me up at night. The anti-aircraft guns were there, but the bullets, the shells, they were locked away in metal boxes. Why? Because it was peacetime, and in the humid Hawaiian air, metal rusts. The quartermaster didn't want the bullets to get corroded, so they boxed them up and put padlocks on them. The keys were in the pockets of duty officers who were sleeping or playing poker or down in Honolulu. We were more afraid of rust than we were of the Imperial Japanese Navy. But let's go back to Saturday night. Late, 11 p.m., the band contest is over. The USS Arizona didn't win, but they played well. The sailors are back in their bunks. Imagine a kid. Let's call him Jimmy. He's from a farm in Kansas. He's lying in his hammock on the Arizona. The ship is gently rocking. He takes out a piece of paper. He writes, "Dear Mom, I hope the winter isn't too bad back home. It's paradise here. I learned to surf today. Don't worry about me. The Navy takes good care of us. I'll be home for Christmas leave in 2 weeks. Please save me a piece of cherry pie." He licks the envelope. He puts a stamp on it. He places it on his locker. He turns off the light. He closes his eyes. He thinks he has a tomorrow. He thinks he has a lifetime. He doesn't know that the torpedoes are already in the tubes. He doesn't know that the dive bombers are warming up their engines on the decks of the Akagi. He sleeps the deep, innocent sleep of the protected, and outside, the Pacific Ocean laps against the steel hull. Slap, 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 counting down the seconds. Why do I tell you this? Why dwell on the night before the tragedy? Because we live our lives in the Saturday night. We go to bed assuming the sun will rise just like it did yesterday. We leave words unsaid. We hold grudges. We worry about rust when we should be worried about the horizon. The innocence of December 6th is gone. We can never get it back. We now live in a world of radar and satellites and instant fear, but we can learn from it. We can learn to cherish the boring, quiet evenings. Because peace is not a guarantee. It's a privilege, and it's fragile as glass. All right, wipe the mist from your eyes. I want to make sure you are listening, really listening, to the details of history. Let's prime that brain. I have 5 questions. No cheating. Question 1. What specific musical event took place at the Block Recreation Center on the night of December 6th? Question 2. How did General Short order the planes to be parked to prevent sabotage? Question 3. Why was the anti-aircraft ammunition locked away in crates? What were they afraid of? Question 4. What did the Japanese pilots cut before the battle to leave for their families? Question 5. What was the name of the ship whose band played that night and was lost the next morning? If you remembered the details about the rust, you understand the terrible irony of that night. Tomorrow, December 7th, we will lower our flags. We will hear the speeches. But tonight, let's just keep the watch. Before you go to sleep, look out your window at the night sky. Listen to the silence. Be grateful for it. And if you have a moment, say a prayer for the boys. The music ended, but the melody lingers on in our hearts. I'm Pop Pop. This is Storytime Brain Prime. Sleep well, friends. May the God bless you. May we always remember